Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the In News series. My name is Pooja Dwivedi. Today we are going to discuss the foundation day of the Indian National Congress. Yesterday, 28th of December, marked the foundation day of the Indian National Congress. The Indian National Congress was established in the year 1885 in order to ensure that India could be on the right path in order to become a nation. Now, we have to move forward from the perspective of GS Mains Paper Second. Specifically, if you are looking for a well-maintained segment which is dedicated to modern history from the perspective of INC, the sessions of INC, moderates and extremists, plus the role of Gandhiji in the development and how INC led us to independence, you have come to the right place. It will be a little longer segment than usual, but I ensure you will get maximum output here. So let us move ahead from the perspective of the examination and look at these many topics that we are going to discuss. Before we move forward with the content, there is an offer of 50% discount which will be available for all online pen drive course and test series, and this will be available only within the time range of 1st Jan to 6th of Jan 2023. These apps, these online pen drive and other courses can also be looked at our website and the Drishti IAS learning app, which is of course available on Play Store, and you will be able to know more about it by contacting on these two numbers. Let us now move ahead and first of all look at the predecessor of INC. Predecessors of INC here means the many organizations which existed before INC. In a very localized manner, they tried to resolve their own grievances which were directly or indirectly related to the British rule. First is, of course, the Landholders Society, which was established in the year 1838. It was the Zamindar Association, or also known as the Landholders Society. It was established to safeguard the interest of the landlords, and that is why it was pretty restricted in nature, only taking into consideration the elitist class. Then Bengal British Indian Society, that was established in the year 1843 to collect and disseminate information related to the actual condition of the people of British India to the world, and specifically in British India. This was the main objective. British Indian Association of Calcutta in 1851, it was established to convey Indian grievances to the British government. Also, the Deccan Association, Debendranath Thakur wanted to expand the other association to each and every area. Specifically, if we talk about the British Indian Association of Calcutta, this was an offspring of that only. So, Debendranath Thakur wanted to expand this association, so it was established in 1852, and this was of course related to the Charter Act of 1853. However, it failed to achieve what it had to for this Charter Act. The Madras Native Association, the Bombay Association of 1852, British India Association of Calcutta's offspring only, and it was established in 1852, and this was of course one of the branches, we can say. Then East India Association, very importantly, it was established by the Grand Old Man of India, Dadabhai Nauroji, in 1866, and different branches were maintained in Bombay, Kolkata and Madras in 1869. Then Pune Sarvajanik Sabha in 1867. India League, it was established in 1875 by Shishir Kumar Ghosh. Other than that, the Indian Association of Calcutta, which was established by Surendranath Banerjee and Anand Mohan Bose in 1876. The Bombay Presidency Association was established in the year 1885 by the combination of very important leaders back then, Firoz Shah Mehta, K.T. Telang, Badruddin Tyabji and others. Madras Mahajan Sabha in 1884 by Veera Raghvachari, P. Anand Charlu and B. Subramaniam Iyer. So these all were the predecessors of INC. But what happened? That there were certain shortcomings which were related to them. First, their areas and activities were very limited. Their grievances were localized in nature, and that is why it was kind of a hindrance when we talk about the rising of the feelings of nationalism. Okay, members and leaders were also limited to the adjoining provinces only. and there was a lack of national unity. There was not a commonality. Every small organization was pretty localized in nature. The leaders were localized in nature, and there was not any sort of commonality. Although the source of grievance was common, but the solution and the tendency to resolve any kind of issue was multifaceted. So there was a need for a pan-India association which could ensure that India as a nation could develop. Then comes INC. The English bureaucrat A.O. Hume, Alan Octavian Hume, is credited to be the founder of the organization. The first session was held in Bombay, on December 28, 1885. It was attended by a delegation of 72 social reformers, journalists and lawyers, and it was held at Gokuldas Tejpal Sanskrit College, in Bombay. And why do we say Alan Octavian Hume, why was he the one to initiate the process? Because the leaders back then wanted to ensure that an Englishman stayed with them so that their intentions did not mortify the British. So that is one of the factors. Other than that, INC was, of course, established to influence the policies of the British government in favor of Indians, not independence. The INC did not want to achieve independence from its very birth, from the very nascent stage. It knew that India as a nation has not developed as of yet. There were regions for people. Nation was the region they are living in. But once they understood that they had a common history, they had a common culture, even if they do not have a common culture, they had somewhat of a feeling that they had a shared history, a shared culture, a shared common enemy. So that is why that had to be developed step by step and not all of a sudden. And the objective is often described as providing a safety valve at that time. See, back then, in order to record your grievances, you either had to agitate, you either had to protest, or some sort of violence could have been there. But because the leaders knew that there are certain steps which we can use to ensure that we record our protest with the British within the four walls of laws, why not do that? So that is why this particular organization was kind of a safety valve for the British, so that proper protest record could have been done and the British did not have to encounter any sort of violent protest. Moving ahead, let's first of all look at the moderate phase. First moderate phase goes from 1885 to 1905. See, this phase is moderate because the methods that was used by the leaders was pretty moderate in nature, not in the extremist nature. So they had their methods based upon patience, steadiness, conciliation and union. Patience, they knew that they will not achieve independence all of a sudden, so they have to remain steady with whatever methods that they were using for years and years to come. Also, they should have ensured, they wanted to ensure that we are not here to protest against the British government, but we will try to show them what we are going through so that they can get their issues resolved. This was their methodology. A.O. Hume, W.C. Banerjee, Surendranath Banerjee, Dadabhai Nauroji, Feroz Shah Mehta, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya, Badruddin Tyabji, Justice Ranade G. Subramania Iyer, these all were the moderate leaders, and they had the methodology to appeal through petitions, writing small petitions, drafting small petitions or large petitions, and then getting them back. Sometimes it was also very frustrating because these petitions were drafted with so much consultation, but the British replied with ignorance. So many a times what used to happen, young leaders used to get very frustrated that we are doing so much, but still we are not getting the reward we thought we would. So then the moderates used to say that these drafted petitions are, although we are addressing it to the British government, but this kind of politics is, this kind of petition, these kind of petitions are more used to show the general public how petitioning is done, how we have to create a political scenario so that we can finally achieve something. So this had to be done for years and years to come, that they knew. Speeches and articles, loudly they professed loyalty to the British because they knew that they thought as well as knew both the things. First, they thought that if they will profess loyalty to the British, they might get what they want, which was of course a failure. But secondly, they did not want the organization to be banned. So that is why in the initial stages, they were very well aware of the fact that if they will go against the government in this nascent stage, in the initial phase, INC would not develop in the future. Moving ahead, there were certain demands of the moderates, such as the plea for the extension of legislative council that leads to the popular control of the administration. Indians should be made a part of the legislative councils so that Indian citizens could be a part in the lawmaking. Removal of restrictions on freedom of the press and speech. Abolition of Arms Act, which breaches the freedom of the people. Separation of judiciary from the executive. Supporter of democracy and nationalism. Exploitative relation of the British could be exempted. Also, there were certain achievements as well. It was, of course, the biggest role the moderates played back then was to instill a feeling of nationalism, birthing the feeling of nationalism. Why India was poor back then was totally explained and in a very decent as well as simple language by Dadabhai Naoroji. The drain of wealth theory which was given by him was very easy. Why the economy of India became subservient to the economy of Britain. It was clearly explained. It could have been absorbed by the most downtrodden, and this is one of the biggest contributions of the moderates. The most aggressive forces of that time, that means the leaders, were a part of INC. This is one of the most, we can say this is the biggest achievement. Political awareness and leadership were instilled by them among the middle, lower middle and the other intelligentsia. They spread the idea of democracy and civil liberty. They sowed the seeds of nationalism and also laid the foundation of Indian national movement. But there were certain shortcomings. People used to say that this group was an elitist class. They did not believe in mass movement. They did not have faith in the understanding of the masses. And this is one of the shortcomings. They failed to widen the scope of the demands. They only restricted it to the legislative part or the administrative part and not the other parts. They did not have any faith in mass participation. They underestimated the importance of masses and they only relied on prayer and petitioning. Only petitioning for how long it could have been done without any reward. And they were leaders who they had a thought process which was dominated or either influenced a lot by the Western ideas. The ideas were not ingrained. The ideas were not related to Indian culture. Okay, so these were the certain issues. Sessions, let's talk about the sessions during the moderate phase. First session was of course held in 1885 in Bombay. President was W.C. Banerjee. Then second session in Calcutta. In 1886, President was Dadabhai Naoroji. Third session, 1887, President was Syed Badruddin Tyabji, first Muslim President. Fourth session was held in Allahabad in 1888, now Prayagraj. President was George Yule, first English President. 1896, in Calcutta, President was Ramitullah Sayani. And here only Vande Mataram, the national song, was sung, okay, by Rabindranath Tagore. In 1899, it was in Lucknow. President was R.C. Dutt. And here demand for permanent fixation of land revenue was raised. Then the next session was in 1901 in Calcutta. President was Dinshaw E. Vacha. Here, first time Gandhiji appeared on the Congress platform. Then 1905 in Banaras, President Gopal Krishna Gokhale. Formal proclamation of Swadeshi movement against the government was done. This was because of the partition of Bengal. In 1906, the president was Dadabhai Naoroji again in the Calcutta session, and there was an adoption of 4 resolutions on Swaraj, that is self-government, self-rule, boycott movement, Swadeshi and national education. In 1907, of course, Surat split. Here the president was Rash Bihari Ghosh. Sometimes it could be asked in your examination who was presiding over the Congress session when the split between moderates and extremists occurred. Okay, moving ahead now, let's talk about the extremist. See, back then the youngsters became disenchanted with the methodology as well as the ideology of the moderates. They could see that nothing is being achieved by this method of prayer and petitioning. And there were other revolutionary movements that were going on across the globe that were undermining the Europeans. The revolutionary movement in Ireland, Russia, Egypt, Turkey, China, and Boer War in South Africa. Defeat of the Italian army by the Ethiopians in 1896, the Russian army by the Japanese in 1905 became a point of flagging that European powers are not, they are not something that we cannot deal with. They are not invincible. So one thing that we have to understand over here, that these ideas were moving by and large in the minds of the youngsters in India. So these extremists became prominent after the partition of Bengal in 1905, and then only we could see the split happening. See, back then, if we talk about the extremist leaders, Lala Lajpat Rai, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Bipin Chandra Pal or Bindo Ghosh, these were the extremist leaders. They did not believe that the British is good, and they thought that British had no sympathy for them, which was of course in contradiction to what the moderates thought. They of course ensured that their methodology was built around that only. So they thought that it is necessary to use pressure, and they started openly agitating against them. First was of course one of the methodologies is boycott any sort of British goods, British services, as well as non-cooperation with the bureaucracy. This was a type of boycott. We will not cooperate with the British, and we will ensure that we go Swadeshi, that is Atmanirbhar Bharat now, to develop our own textile, our schools, our colleges, our style of painting. This was all Swadeshi, so that people could be confident about their culture and their ancestry as well as history. Passive resistance to British rule by non-payment of revenues and taxes, public meetings and processions. These emerged as a major method of mass mobilization, and also making religious festivals popular. That was made by Bal Gangadhar Tilak. That was one of the shortcomings as well. We will talk about that as well. The Swadeshi spirit ensured that establishment of these many industries were done by the Indians, and they disfavored the use of violence against the British. Also, they did not approve of the methods of political murder and assassination, although they had sympathy for the revolutionaries. Moving ahead, their achievements are of course significant. They brought a fundamental change in the nature of the Indian nationalism when they called for Swaraj. They ensured that use of more radical methods are there than that of moderates, so that British could understand that time has come to make India independent. They ensured that people are emotionally charged. They knew, the people should know that nationalism is not just a political concept, but it is a feeling, and it was based on the rich interpretation of the Indian religious tradition, because time and again it was fed into the brains of Indians that Indians are uncivilized, and it is the burden of the white man to civilize them. But it was not so, and they wanted to reorient Indian religious tradition to worldly life and link them with the national liberation struggle, which was done by Aurobindo Ghosh. Then mobilization of people was one of the most significant achievements. Even the common man felt a sense of belongingness in the nation. They knew for very well whatever they are going through, whatever miseries that they were going through, it was a result of the British rule that was instilled. When that was instilled by the moderates, it was implemented properly by the extremists. Moving ahead, if we talk about the failure, as they were pretty radical in nature, the government suppressed any sort of such movements with a heavy hand. India back then was still a nation in the making. It was not a nation made. It was not a very well politically, you can say, reinvigorated India back then, which it would have been, which it finally developed to be in 1947. So that is also there. Religious division was one of the problem, because certain times it happened that the minority stayed out of such kind of mass mobilization. And one thing that I said earlier, Bal Gangadhar Tilak made Ganesh festival, Shivaji festival. So, it was related to the Hindu culture. So Muslims could not feel a sense of belongingness through those particular movements. So these were the certain shortcomings. Moving ahead, now let's talk about the sessions which were held during the extremist phase. 1910, Allahabad, President Sir William Wedderburn. M.A. Jinnah back then decided to decried the separate electorate system introduced by the Act of Moorlam into Reform in 1909. In 1911, President was B.N. Dhar, and for the first time the recital of Jan Gan Man was done in this session. 1915, Bombay, the President was Sir S.P. Sinha. Constitution of the Congress was altered to admit the delegates from the extremist section. When Surat split happened in 1907, it was undone in 1915. The President remembered this. In 1960, Lucknow, again President A.C. Majumdar. Unity between the two factions, moderates and extremists. Lucknow Pact was signed between the Congress and Muslim League to build political consensus. Important points. Moving ahead, 1917 Calcutta, President was Annie Besant, first woman President of Congress. 1918 was the special session when the President was Syed Hassan Imam, and the session was convened to deliberate the contentious Montagu-Chelmsford reform scheme. 1919 Amritsar, President was Motilal Nehru. Congress extended support to the Khilafat movement here. 1920 Calcutta, President was Lala Lajpat Rai. Mahatma Gandhi moved the non-cooperation resolution here. Also, Mahatma Gandhi's importance can never be undermined. You are going to think during this session from the perspective of exam and not any party. So please take all the sorts of political contentious words that have been fed to India in all over the years. Mahatma Gandhi's role can never be undermined. It might be possible that you can criticize him as a person or as a human being, but you can never ever deny the importance he held and the importance he has till right now in the Indian national movement. So Mahatma Gandhi's role can never be undermined. When he returned from South Africa to India in 1918, he was very well aware of the fact that the extremists ruled the country through INC. He knew that he had to ensure that his ideologies, which worked pretty well in South Africa, have to work here. So he started moving to the remotest corners of the country, visiting the remotest corners of the country, because he knew that rural India is the actual India. His modes and ideologies were markedly different, and his political mentor was Sri Gopal Krishna Gokhale ji. Gandhiji knew that no mode of armed revolution could ensure India's independence. He was elected as the President of Indian National Congress in 1924, and the first thing that he did was to increase the reach of the party so that the most common of the common man could be a part of it. So he reduced the fee of the INC and restructured the entire party hierarchy, opened new party branches, and that made INC to reach the heights of its popularity. He introduced, as the president, the principles and ideals of Satyagraha and not any violent movement or struggle. He called off the non-cooperation movement abruptly during the Chauri Chaura because of the Chauri Chaura incident in 1922, and he was then arrested in 1922. Two factions, when he was under arrest, he was in hibernation. Two factions under C.R. Das and Chakrabarti Rajagopalachari gathered force, and Congress was about to see another split, but it did not happen because Gandhiji came into the picture. He undertook a fast in order to bid to unite the warring factions. He returned from a brief hibernation following his imprisonment, and in the Calcutta Conference of 1928, he influenced the enthusiasms of the younger candidates that could be a part of the INC. Jawaharlal Nehru, Subhash Chandra Bose. INC celebrated Indian independence on 26 January 1930. That was ignored by the British. Civil disobedience movement ensued with Gandhi at the helm was about to, ensure India's independence. The civil disobedience movement was strong enough to lead the British authorities to cower down under pressure. Gandhi-Irwin Pact was signed, and what happened that the British government, started implementing the divide and rule policy, of course through the communal award, and that was not going down very well with Gandhiji. So after a point of time, when he saw the Hindu section is going to be divided further, he undertook fast unto death, but Pune Pact was signed between Ambedkar and Gandhiji, and that is why it is said that he is one of the most important character in the Indian national movement. When World War II began in 1939, Britain made India belligerent without consulting us. So what happened that India said that we are going to, INC said that we are going to declare that India would not support the war effort until and unless we become independent. So a mass civil disobedience under the name of Quit India movement was launched in 1942, and the British government of Clement Attlee passed an independence bill in July 1947. Finally that year we got independence. So this was INC. Now we talk about the sessions which were held from 1920 onwards. Nagpur, during the Nagpur session, President C. 𝐸𝐬𝐴 was the president, of course, and the reconstitution of the working committees of Congress on linguistic basis was done. M.A. Jinnah left the INC. 1922 in Gaya, President C.R. Das was there. He and other leaders broke away from INC and formed the Swaraj Party. 1924 Belgaum, President M.K. Gandhi. Only session which was presided by Gandhiji. In 1925 Kanpur, President was Sarojini Naidu. This session saw the first Indian woman president. First was Amy Besant. 1931 Karachi, the president there was Vallabhbhai Patel. Resolution of fundamental rights and national economic program was done. Endorsement of Gandhi-Irwin Pact, and Gandhiji nominated to represent INC in the second roundtable conference in London. 1934 Bombay, president was Rajendra Prasad. Amendment to the Constitution of Congress. 1936 Lucknow, Jawaharlal Nehru, and he pushed towards the socialist ideas. Then 1937 Faizpur, President Jawaharlal Nehru. This was the first session to be held in village. 1938 Haripura, president was S.C. Bose. National Planning Committee was set up under Jawaharlal Nehru. 1939 Tripuri, president was Rajendra Prasad. Subhash Chandra Bose was re-elected but had to resign. Rajendra Prasad was appointed as the president in his place, and then Forward Bloc was launched by Subhash Chandra Bose that year only. 1940 Ramgarh, president was Abul Kalam Azad. Very special fact that is there with respect to Abul Kalam Azad. As the president of the INC, tell me in the comment segment what is it. Civil disobedience movement had to be launched at the appropriate time and circumstances. And in the years between 1941 to 45, QIM, RIN mutiny, INA trials all were done. Phase of constitutional negotiations such as Scripps mission, Wavell plan, cabinet mission was done. And on account of these events during this phase, no Congress session was held. And then at the time of independence, J.B. Kriplani was there when he served as the president of the INC. So that's it. In today's episode, it was a pretty long episode. I'm sure you understood each and everything, but I will also take the names of those students who have answered the last question correctly. C was the correct answer. H. Shankar has answered it correctly. Saundarya, Naveenism, Kumar Satya. Faizan, Vaishnavi. Tushita, Shirley. Anju, Disha, Srinivas, Soumya. Sai Shruti, Kumar Satya again, Rupal, Nidhi, Jahnavi, Vaibhav, Being Wasim, Vani, Rehan and Puneet. Thank you so much for answering the last question. I will attach another question. You have to answer that as well. Thank you so much and stay updated.